You should not trust the shiny, happy faces that you see in videos, that you see on social media, and the voices that you hear in your podcasts. And I'm not saying that you should ignore everything, and I'm not saying that the people who are talking to you are lying to you, but the content that is being presented to you in audio, in video, in social media posts is carefully curated. It's a very specific snapshot of the content creator's life. And when I say the content creator's life, I'm including myself inside of that. That when I am speaking to you, I'm sharing the truth. I'm sharing the things that I believe about myself, about healing, about transformation as true, but it's not the whole truth. You know, when I'm recording something like this, there's lightness in my voice, and there's not always lightness in my voice. When I talk about my work and my clients, there's joy about that stuff, except the fact that there's not always joy about that stuff. And I'm not saying that to disregard, but it's important for us as we're consuming content. And so today, what I want to do is I want to talk to you about emotional resilience. And emotional resilience is, I think, one of the two most important things that I tap for to help me to navigate the day and to tell you that story about how I present myself and how things impact me in the world. I want to share with you what's happened over the course of the last 6 or 7 weeks in my life, in my business, and how my emotional resilience was eroded by what was going on and how that impacted the way that I showed up, and then finally how I responded to that. So this is a very simple conversation on emotional resilience. This is Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast recorded to live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 594, originally aired January 17th, 2024. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to join me. Thanks for spending a little time with me today. Really excited about today's podcast because I think the information I'm sharing is really important. When I sit down to tap and I'm doing transformational work, there are two primary goals, kind of in a big picture way. The first is to be comfortable inside of my own skin, and we talk about that a lot in the podcast. But the second is also, how do I build emotional resilience? Emotional resilience is where I sit as a baseline emotionally, so that when things happen to me, it dictates and responds to the way I respond to the world. And to hopefully make it easier for you to consume that, I'm just going to share a little of my own experience very, very recently. Now, before we jump into that, I'm going to be talking about tapping as the tool that I use to build this emotional resilience. If you are new to tapping and you don't have any experience with it, all you need to do is follow the little arrow in the upper right-hand corner. That is going to take you to learntotap.com. That will give you the basics understanding of how to use this amazing tool that I use daily for myself, that I use with my clients, that I use to build emotional resilience. But the really good news is in this conversation, I think these concepts of emotional resilience are going to work for you, even if you're not a tapper and even if you never become interested in tapping, because this is about how we navigate the world and how what happens to us impacts us as we navigate. And so as we do that, I am going to do this for you today in 3 parts. The first part is I'm just going to talk about emotional resilience, what I mean by that particular definition, how I think it impacts my life, and why that is a goal for something for me to work on. Secondly, I'm going to share my firsthand experience of the month of December and the beginning of January and the ways in which my emotional resilience was eroded by a number of different things in the world, choices I made, and just kind of lay that out so you can see over time how something like that can create an impact. And then finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the things that I have been doing recently to rebuild that emotional resilience. And the beautiful thing about these tools are these are the tools that I normally use to build and maintain emotional resilience. And because of what's going on, they have been in sharper focus in my mind. So these are going to be tools that you're going to be able to implement right away. Part 1, emotional resilience. So when I am talking about emotional resilience, what I'm talking about is a combination of two things. One is my emotional baseline, like where do I naturally live emotionally? And second is based on where I am living emotionally inside of that, how am I responding to what is going on? Because the better my emotions, the more resilient I am to things going wrong. I talk about all the time. The reason why that I work on emotional resilience and I work on having systems in my life and my business isn't so that everything goes right, because there are things that are going to go wrong. But when I have systems, those things that go wrong impact me less. When I'm emotionally resilient, when those things go wrong, they impact me less. And so when we're talking about emotional resilience, it's kind of like your emotional disposition. As a general rule, I'm a happy-go-lucky, confident person in this world. And you know people in your life, I know people in my life who are real grumpopotamuses. And so what happens is we start with an emotional scale. Now, an emotional scale is just a list of emotions from the worst emotion to the best emotion. And depending on who the author is and what your experience is, you might organize those emotions in different ways. But I think an emotional scale is a really useful thing because it helps us to frame what is going on, and it helps us to evaluate our transformation even before we start to look into this long-term emotional resilience. Oftentimes when I think of the lower parts of an emotional scale, I think of depression, and anger is a step above depression, and frustration is a step above anger. And the reason why those are stepping stones is depending on which emotional state I am in, I'm going to respond differently. When someone is depressed, they're in a circumstance where they have no energy, they have no focus, they have no drive. They're just a giant slug stuck there inside of that. And so when things happen, the easy way to respond is to disengage and to disconnect. Well, if the next step up is anger, now I am probably not going to make the best choices that I could be making in my life from a state of anger. But for me, I find anger to be a healthier emotional step on the emotional scale, because when I'm angry, I'm pushing back, I'm fighting for myself, I'm fighting for what I think is emotionally right. Now, it's still possible for me to really over-emotionally respond, but I'm at least fighting for myself. For me, the next step up from that would be frustration. So when I'm frustrated, I'm disappointed with how things are going on, and I am still likely to make bad choices. But based on the fact that I'm frustrated and not anger, even though I might not be making the best choices, even though I might be frustrated, even though I might be banging my head against the wall, I'm going to make better choices than when I am angry. So in the micro, in any given moment when I sit down to tap, what I'm trying to do is I'm not trying to be great. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to move up one step in the emotional scale. And then I'm trying to move up another step in the emotional scale. And then I'm trying to move up another step in the emotional scale. And sometimes I have the time, I have the wherewithal, my system is ready for healing and release, or I can jump up multiple steps. And other times I'm in a circumstance where getting from angry to frustrated is the absolute best I can do. So that is the idea of an emotional scale, how we move up and down. So our emotional resilience is the place in that scale where we generally sit. And so the higher up I generally sit, kind of my up and down from day to day is going to be in the part of the scale that is that emotional set point, that emotional resilience. So if you know someone in your life who is a grumpopotamus, then they're going to be lower on that emotional scale. And so when something goes wrong, it's going to impact them more because of where they are. Or if you're someone who's typically comfortable and confident and happy-go-lucky, that's who I am. I'm a generally happy person. Because I'm higher on the emotional scale, when something goes wrong, it impacts me less. Now, this is a gross oversimplification. But as I'm navigating the day, all of my experiences are positive, negative, or neutral. And so it's almost like, I make a sale. That's a positive one action in my life. My internet is out for 45 minutes. That's a negative one impact in my life. I'm in a circumstance where I don't have access to my email server for 4 or 5 days. Happened to me last year in my business. Okay, that's not a negative one. That's a negative 5 or 6. So there's a more dramatic in what's going on. And so based on where our baseline is, when something happens to us, it's going to make the kind of gentle up or down of the surface of the sea of our emotional experience. And so you can see that when we're in a circumstance that when our emotional resilience is higher, it is easier for us to deal with what is going on. Now, our emotional resilience set point is based on a number of things. The first is our personality. Some of us are more optimistic and some people are more pessimistic. And so that's going to impact what is going on. The second thing that's going to impact our emotional resilience is how we are feeling. My physical health. Am I sick? Am I healthy? Am I getting a good night's sleep? Am I not getting a good night's sleep? Now, over a single day, if I'm sick, it might have a little impact on it, but I bounce back to my normal emotional resilience. But if I'm sick for an entire week, what happens is it starts to undermine and undermine and undermine, and so my emotional baseline goes down a little bit. The same is true based on the success or lack of success we're having in our lives, the connection to the things that we love. That's the reason why I work so hard to help people to live authentic lives, is because the more life of passion, the more authentically that I am living, that emotional baseline, that emotional resilience set point keeps going higher and higher. Now, there are things that can make us tumble very, very fall down that scale. If I have a loved one who dies, that's going to impact me in a very dramatic way. Now, again, the higher my emotional resilience, the more well-resourced I am going to respond to that, but it's still going to impact me dramatically. So when we have an emotionally high set point, it does not mean that everything is perfect no matter what comes at us. But again, the goal of my systems and the goal of my emotional resilience is to be in a circumstance so that when these things go wrong, they impact me less than if I was at a different point on that particular emotional set point. And so for me, by consistently working on living an authentic life, being comfortable inside of my own skin, having self-concept that is positive and self-love and believing in myself, making choices that are leading toward a life that I want to do, surrounding myself with people with common vision who are also at a higher emotional set point, those things over time are going to help that tide for me and that baseline to rise. So that is the emotional set point and the emotional resilience. And again, I think this is just kind of a good overarching view when we are looking at how do we create transformation in our life and how do we move forward. Part 2, my December and how it impacted my emotional resilience. So as I mentioned in the last section, sometimes there are big things that can cause us to tumble down that emotional scale. And not only does it impact us in the moment, but can impact us for a long period of time about how we are going through the world. You could lose a job, a relationship could end, a loved one could be really sick or die. Those things impact us in really, really dramatic ways. We could have some sort of trauma thrust upon us in our lives. That's going to tumble us down. The other way that our emotional set point is diminished is a death by 1,000 paper cuts. Because like I said, that emotional set point makes us resilient to something that is going wrong. But at a certain point, it can become too much. I can have a great storm window and it's raining outside and it has very little impact on what's going on until it keeps raining and raining and raining and raining and raining and raining and raining. And the caulking around the edge of the window that is a water sealant might start to be undermined, or the wood that the caulking is put into starts to absorb so much water, it doesn't matter that there is a water sealant around it. And so because there's this persistent water going at something that is waterproof, it becomes too much. The same can happen in our lives. It's almost the emotional death of 1,000 paper cuts. When I am at a high emotional set point, when I have really strong emotional resilience, 1, 2, 3, 4 things might not impact me, or they impact me in such a small way. Take a deep breath and I can work my way through it. But when those things add up and add up and add up and add up, at a certain point, it becomes too much. And so that's what's happened to me. I didn't have this big dramatic thing happen, but instead I had lots of small things happen. And part of the reason it was so hard is because the excitement that I had that was having all of these things happen. So as you are aware, or may not be aware, back in the beginning of December, I started sharing my Authentic Action Academy. I had this great insight over the summer. At the end of the summer is a new way of teaching transformation. And it is one of my absolute favorite things to teach. It is creating such amazing, deep, profound transformation for myself and my clients. It's just, I'm so excited about this particular teaching. And I could not wait to share it in a more public way, not in the classes that I already had, not with my current students, not with my current clients, but really sharing it in a big way. And so as I worked through the fall, I was working on the launch of the Authentic Action Academy, and I was working on the content, and I was working on the marketing, and then December happened. And so the first thing that happened when I did this was, as I was sharing it, and I was sharing it broader than I normally share stuff. So it wasn't the people who had been listening to me all of the time, but it's people who occasionally consumed my content or saw me as part of other people's tapping programs. And in the process of sharing that, I had a little less rapport with the audience. And so I got a number of complaints about how I was being dishonest and scammy, and I needed to tap for my money, sign money point, because it was obvious that I was in a circumstance that I was just trying to steal a bunch of people in the transformational space. And I got a whole bunch of those nasty grams. It's not the first time that that's happened to me, but that was number one, what happened. Then number two, as I was launching the program, the software that I was using to get people to sign up with, I made a number of errors with the software, and there were some parts of the software that did not work the way it was supposed to. And so in the process of people trying to sign up and get information and get involved with what I was doing, things weren't working, and there was lots of confusing communication coming from the shopping software. And as I say that, if I would have been a customer on the other side of all of this happening, I would have been confused and frustrated and disappointed. And so now I'm also dealing with people who are dissatisfied with the process. Number three, there were a number of unforced errors. There were mistakes that I made. There were promises that I made to the people joining the program that I wasn't able to get them stuff as quickly and as well as I would have liked to have. And in addition to making mistakes, it was super, super embarrassing. And so now the people who were choosing to work with me, I was letting them down because I was making mistakes. And if any one of those three things would have happened, if I would have been attacked for my marketing tactics, if I would have had problems with my software, if I would have made public mistakes, if any one of those three things would have happened by themselves, it wouldn't have been a lot of fun. It might have hurt my credibility in the world, but I can bounce back from that because I've been in business for 17 years doing just this. I've been self-employed since 1997. I've made lots of those mistakes. I've had those experiences before. I know how to respond to them graciously and kindly and try and take care of it. And even though it sucks, it doesn't knock me down. It doesn't knock my emotional set point down. It doesn't impact my emotional resilience. But when all three of those things stacked on top of each other, combined with my excitement to share this thing that I loved so much, oh, did it suck? Oh, does it suck? And it didn't suck because I was being attacked. That sucks. It sucked because I wasn't serving the people I want to serve in the way I want to. That my errors or other errors were getting in the way of me being able to do the things that I really wanted to be doing. And it was a death by 1,000 paper cuts. And I was tender. I still am. And I just kind of felt like I was walking around like this giant bruise. Have you ever had one of those moments where you're just like, I can't do anything right. And that's what it really felt like because I was making so many mistakes. And the tricky part about this emotional resilience thing is when things are going wrong and the lower your emotional resilience is, the more those things impact you. And so I would make a mistake and I would feel unconfident, which would make me insecure, which would make me act with less confidence, which would mean I would make another mistake, which would make problems, which would undermine my confidence. And so not only was it something that was a kind of a spiral staircase down emotionally in my resilience, it was logarithmic. It was exponential. It was growing. It wasn't this linear decline that the worse I felt, the more the next problem impacted me. So I might have gone down a little, and then the next step down was a little bit more, and the next step down was a little bit more. It's almost like I was gaining speed as I was going down that emotionally. Now, I don't want this to be a pity party. And I say that with all sincerity. Like, I'm not saying this because I'm hoping you're going to go into the comments and say really nice things about me. Like, it's not about that. I appreciate nice compliments. I appreciate people complimenting my work. But my goal of this is to share with you the experience. Because one of the things that happens for those of us who are teachers in a public way is that we become very, very good communicators. We speak so clearly. I know I am a good communicator. And oftentimes when I talk about things in my life, I'm able to articulate them simply, which make them seem they are easy. And just because something is simple doesn't mean it is easy. I'm sharing this because this is the place that I am feeling stuck and struggling as a way. So one, you recognize you are not alone inside of this. Hopefully, if you're tuning into my stuff on the regular, it's because you have some belief and appreciation for the work that I do. And I want you to keep coming back and consuming the stuff in that particular way. But I also want you to know that it doesn't always go perfectly for me. No matter how clearly I say something into this microphone, how simply I say it is for me, that's not the case. And so that was, and that is my current experience. Part 3, my response. Now, I wish I could tell you when all of this was happening, all I had to do was tap for a few moments and it all went away. And every single time I sit down to tap or use any transformational tool, I am open to the possibility that that sort of healing and transformation is going to happen. I am open to 1 minute and 1 session miracles. And I also recognize the reality of transformation, especially when we're talking about something like our emotional baseline. Again, the difference between tapping to feel better in the moment is just about my resource state right now, where changing my emotional baseline isn't just about how I feel in the moment, but what is my general state. And so it takes time to move up. And because I am taking steps, I am less tender. I am still tender. I am struggling less. I am still struggling, but it's moving forward. And so here are all of the things that I did. Number 1, I first gave myself permission to feel exactly what I was feeling. Fully articulated emotions are short-lived. Now, short-lived might be longer than we want them to hang around, but I recognized it was really, really important to create time and space for me to go, okay, this is what I'm feeling and it sucks and this is why it's feeling. Not moping around and bringing it to my client calls and my work and my personal engagement with my loved ones, but daily going in the morning, daily at the end of the day, and just kind of settling in and just being honest about where I was. The second thing I did, and this helped a lot. I mean, I'm not like, it was a good thing for me to do, but it also helped me emotionally, is I took very public, direct responsibility for the mistakes I'd made. I wasn't like, oh, it's no big deal, we're figuring it out. It's like, this is the mistake. This is how I made the mistake. This is how I'm trying to make it right. And so what that did was, it helped me to feel more confident in front of the people I was serving because I didn't feel like things were going crappy and I was being dishonest. Things were going crappy and I'm saying, hey, things are going crappy. This is how I'm trying to respond to it. And what that did was, because I was showing up more honestly, it was easier for me not to wallow because I wasn't afraid they were going to find something out. I wasn't afraid that people were going to realize how bad things were going inside of this. And so it made a huge difference in moving forward. The third thing I did, now that I'm feeling better, is I just took a step back and I went, okay, great. What are all of the lessons that I can learn from this particular experience? What can I learn about myself? What can I learn about my communication style? What can I learn about structuring? Because when I look at the lessons and how I can do things differently in the future, I immediately start regaining control. Because it's not like, oh, this is going to happen again. It might happen again, but I now have a new plan. I now have new information. And again, when I have a new plan, when I'm able to see problems coming and respond to them better, it's easier for me to have emotional resilience that is higher, a higher emotional baseline. The fourth thing I did is I spent time with people I adore. And not talking about this, but I am lucky enough to have people in my life that when I spend time with them, I feel like a better human because of the nature of our relationship. I feel like a better human because I'm around people who I really, really adore. And so it's easier for me to believe in myself when I'm surrounded by people who also believe in themselves. There's a silly cliche that we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And on some level, it's true. When I'm around creative people, I'm more likely to be creative. When I'm around people on the growth edge, I'm more able to be around on my own growth edge. When I am doing something that is making me feel better, it's going to do the same. When I'm around people who feel good, it impacts me. The fifth thing I did is I just spent time doing things I'm good at. And I'm not talking about things professionally, but there's things that I am good at in my life. Because when I'm inside of my competency, it's easier for me to see myself as competent. And so I made a list of things that I'm really good at. Some of them professional, some of them personal. And I made sure I leaned into them and I spent more time with those particular things. And then finally, number 6, I tapped and then I tapped and then I tapped with my practitioner and then I tapped some more and then I tapped with some audios and I tapped with some videos and I tapped and I tapped and I tapped. And I recognized that as I was doing those 5 other structural things to impact the emotional resilience, I was then dealing with the emotion I was dealing with in this moment. So it was out of the way. So it was easier for me to build up. You know, it's kind of like it's easier to build a wall when you have swept all of the debris out of the way in the place that you want to build that wall. By taking the time every single morning, cleaning up the construction site, because of what has ever come in overnight, it makes it easier for us to build. Spending time every single day doing this made it significantly easier for me to move forward in this way. So like I said, I'm not all the way back, but I'm doing so much better, and that's what I did. So in conclusion, again, I didn't record this for your sympathy. I didn't record this for you to go, oh, poor Gene, it's so hard for him. That's not it. But instead, I recorded this so that hopefully you have a little clear understanding of what emotional resilience is, how it can be impacted, and why it's so important for us to do things to recover. And then again, I have just offered to you a short list of possible ways of responding. It's not a comprehensive list. It's not a complete list, but hopefully my experience of the last 6 weeks is going to make it easier for you as you try and navigate and build your emotional resilience. If you have any questions about the process and what I've been going through, any follow-up questions, drop it in the comments down below. Shoot me an email, support@tappingqanda.com. If we have some really good questions, I'll certainly record a follow-up to share more about my experience, about things that are unclear and all of that. On a final note, you're not alone. Better is possible. The people you look up to struggle as well. And it's not, again, about creating a life where nothing goes wrong. It's about creating a way for us to move forward. If you enjoyed the little conversation today and you know someone in your life who might enjoy this, please be our ambassador, pass it along. I always joke, Our marketing budget is your word of mouth. So if you know someone else in your life who could appreciate this, please pass this along. On the screen right now, you can see a playlist of all the past podcast audios. Go back, watch them. There's lots of really, really awesome teaching there. And until next time, Gene Monterastelli, I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.